Welcome to the Unofficial Steelers Podcast, the podcast so unofficial it doesn't have a home. Here's your host, from In Hindsight, Nathan Heitz. From Steelers Nation Australia, Mark Davison. And from State of the Steelers, Daniel J. Here we go.
Well, that was a very disappointing and embarrassing loss by the Pittsburgh Steelers, losing to the Cleveland Browns 13-10 to another rookie quarterback who outplayed our number one first round quarterback, the first quarterback taken overall in last year's draft. I mean, how embarrassing does this have to continue to get before the Pittsburgh Steelers will acknowledge that they have a problem? You know, I know that the defense had their woes and this, that, and a third, but they held the Cleveland Browns to 13 points. 13 points. And the offense couldn't do jack. You know, the offense had their opportunities. It was Kenny Tebow time, because that was the only opportunity the only time that Kenny was going to be, or is good, is in fourth quarters, right? Kenny Tebow time comes up. 2 minutes in the rest of the game, down or the game is tied 10-10. He's got to get in field goal range, and I think it's in two different occasions late in the fourth quarter that he had this opportunity, and in both occasions went 3 and out. Where was the clutch gene now? Has he exhausted his clutchness? I don't know, but if you're a Kenny Pickett apologist and you think that this was on somebody else, on Canada and the scheme. And I'm not going to say that Canada, called the perfect game. He really, well, I don't know. I won't know until I see the all 22. But what I do know is that the running game was doing well. I don't understand why Jaylen Warren only had 9 carries, especially after he had a 74-yarder. And obviously, he's better than the other running back. Now, I don't know if that's a Canada thing or that's a Tomlin thing. Pretty sure that's a Tomlin thing. This loyalty to certain players or whatever, or maybe it's an Art Rooney thing, that they're paying Najee Harris so much money that they need to feature him as the number one back. He needs to have all the carries. There was a situation there in the game where the Steelers were like 3rd and 18 and they did a draw, and Najee Harris ended up getting like 14 yards of it, but it was wide open. Had that been Jaylen Warren in that situation, he's probably getting that first down and more. But no, that's not the case. Now, I don't know who's in charge of personnel and who's in charge of when a player comes in or when a player is on the bench, but, that decision needs to have some rethinking done. All right, let's look at some stats in this game and kind of tell you what I think. Well, first and foremost, I want to say that the Browns out-physicaled the Pittsburgh Steelers. Soon as out the gate, I'll be honest, it's felt very much similar to, back in 2019, the Mason Rudolph helmet game, where the Browns were just, a notch level above the Pittsburgh Steelers when it came to intensity, when it came to physicality. That was what this game felt like to me starting it off. It started off with, in my opinion, that the Browns were just playing out physically playing the Pittsburgh Steelers. And they go down the field, they score. Fortunately, the defense ends up putting a lid on that, but the offense never gets going. I'm going to bring it up real quick. I know it's behind me, but I want to see it. So Kenny Pickett is 15-28 for 106 yards, 3.8 average. He was sacked 3 times for 29 yards. I mean, that's almost a third of his yards that he threw through the air were taken back in sacks, and probably even more when it comes to the penalties that were created during some of these pass plays, whether they were holding or pass interference by the offense or whatever the case may have been. Once you accumulate all those yards, Kenny Pickett had literally, when it came to the passing game, was probably a negative number. Kenny is elite. That's funny. Negative number in the passing yards, in my opinion. Jalen Warren, 9 carries for 129, long of 74, 1 touchdown. Najee Harris, 12 for 35, 2.9 yards. Why is Najee Harris getting the ball that much more than Jalen Warren? I mean, it doesn't sound like a lot, 9 to 12, but that's 25% more of the carries. And Kenny Pickett had the ball 4 times for 9 yards. George Pickens, 1 for -1. And as I watched this game and I saw what the Steelers were doing to the Cleveland Browns, which was they were starting to figure out what he was doing. They were starting to pressure the Cleveland Browns offense, and they were handling everything in front of them. Very similar to what defenses do to the Pittsburgh Steelers. And up until the last part of the game, DTR for the Cleveland Browns wasn't throwing over the middle. He wasn't, he was throwing out to the sideline behind the line of scrimmage. Their offense looked very similar to the Pittsburgh Steelers offense. And the reason why their offense for the Cleveland Browns looked that way is because they were protecting a second string quarterback. I feel that the Pittsburgh Steelers are doing the same when it comes to Kenny Pickett. They are protecting a second string quarterback. Now, I know a lot of people are going to say, oh, Matt Canada doesn't throw the ball over the field, Where are Mitch Trubisky's interceptions coming from? The middle of the field. So I don't think that the Pittsburgh Steelers are going to go in there and say, hey, let's handcuff Kenny Pickett and not have him throw over the middle of the field, but let's let Mitch Trubisky, or as one of my good buddies who is a New Orleans Saints fan, who's familiar with him because they played more often when he was a Chicago Bears quarterback, they used to call him Mitch Turd Biscuit. So you have some pretty bad quarterbacks in this room. My biggest fear is that the Pittsburgh Steelers have not given up on a first round player draft pick within 4 years, and going back to, I can't even remember, Santonio Holmes. I think Santonio Holmes was the last player who didn't reach 4 years of their contract that was drafted in the first round. That, unless there was some injury. I think Shazier, he had his injury. His 5th year was picked up. So he was going to get a second year or a second contract. But all the other players that were first rounders that were a bust, Jarvis Jones, the Devin Bushes of the world, Artie Burns, Terrell Edmonds, what happened with those guys? It lasted their 4 years, and it's not even that the Steelers just said, all right, we're going to hold them on the roster. They started them for 4 years. So my concern is this was going to happen. Now, I know that Kenny Pickett, that isn't a Omar Khan pick. That is a Kevin Colbert pick. So I understand that there's that aspect of it, but I strongly suspect that the Pittsburgh Steelers are going to have Kenny Pickett married to Mike Tomlin. Mike Tomlin has 1 more year on his contract. This was going into a second year. There was a lot of controversy this offseason because the Steelers did not extend him. I think they want to see what they have in Kenny, and I think that Tomlin is married to Kenny, and if it ends up not working out this year or next year, I don't think that Tomlin is getting an extension at that point. And at that point, we might finally see a change at the top, and maybe perhaps a change in philosophy, a change in direction. Maybe perhaps we'll have an offensive-minded coach. I know a lot of folks hate on Canada and look at Canada as a guy that shouldn't be there. They should get somebody else. But the offensive coordinator that the Steelers are looking for is a head coach quality, or is probably a head coach somewhere. You can go and get some kind of, ball boy from Kyle Shanahan's tree. That doesn't necessarily mean or equal out to the fact that it's going to turn into some magnificent offense, especially when you have, Mike Tomlin, where the type of game that he wants to see is a old-fashioned, down to the last second kind of game, a physicality type of game, keeping the score low. When you keep the score low, you keep teams in games. Like I said, let's see. Canada does what he's told. Yeah, I agree. I think that there's a few things that go along with it. And I think that the first thing I was going to start off when I went on this rant was the fact that the throws over the middle of the field, those are not happening. Now, are those not happening because it's not designed there? Well, if Mitch Trubisky is throwing interceptions over the field, that means that, there's not a handcuff there, which means that it comes down to the quarterback's decision and vision. Does he see and have the arm to put the ball in places in the middle of the field? I don't know. And then you also have to throw in the fact that there's been a few times, whether it's because of the gloves or whether it's because of the hand size or the arm strength or a combination of all those things, but the ball sometimes floats on Kenny Pickett. And when it floats on Kenny Pickett and you're throwing that in the middle of the field, you get a lot of tip balls and a lot of interceptions. Last season, a lot of folks were saying, the conversation was that the Pittsburgh Steelers and Kenny Pickett don't throw over the middle then as well, and they don't do play action anymore. Well, there's some context there. I believe it was, and I've got to go back and look it up, but I think that the Pittsburgh Steelers were number 32 in success rate over the middle, I think they were 30th in play action pass. So those were plays that Kenny Pickett struggled at. So when, you can't have your cake and eat it too. You can't say, let's focus in on the plays that Kenny is good at and not do the plays that Kenny is bad at. And then at the same time say, why aren't we targeting the middle of the field? Those two things can't happen or those two things can't exist in the same time. Unless Kenny Pickett can figure out how to throw over the field, unless he can figure out how to read cover 2 zone, unless he can figure out how to throw an anticipatory throw in a window before the receiver makes his break and accurately throwing it where the receiver is going to be, this team is going to be in trouble. Not to mention this slow release that he has that will make freaking Brian Leftwich look like Aaron Rodgers out there. He has to wind up and throw the ball. He has to do the perfect motion every single time. And you know what, buddy? This is the NFL. You're not going to have a perfect pocket every single play. You're going to have pressure in your face. You're going to have to be able to make a pass off center, off your back foot, around the defense if you want to be successful in the NFL. And those are the plays and those are the things that just don't happen. Now, Kenny Pickett has already been, outplayed by Will Levis, C.J. Stroud, now DTR. I mean, for God's sakes, the only quarterback that came out of his, quarterback class at this point that's worth anything was Mr. Irrelevant. That was a bad class to pick in, much less to pick Kenny Pickett. In fact, in most quarterback boards last season, he wasn't first. Now, it's going to be, there ain't nothing the Steelers can do about it now. The Steelers aren't going to change their ways. They're not going to say, all right, let's put in Mason Rudolph. Let's put in Mitch Trubisky. Let's find somebody else. That's not who they are. That's not how they are. And at the end of the day, they're still 6-4 and still in position for a playoff push. And given the strength of their schedule, they can stumble into a wild card game. Because the schedule ain't very strong. In fact, this was a game that in most years, the Cleveland Browns are dropping. They lose their starting quarterback, Deshaun Watson, a guy that has played poorly, while he's been a Cleveland Brown, who finally kind of got things going at the end of last week's game against the Baltimore Ravens to will that team into a victory. They get the news a couple of days later that he's out for the season. That's news that would take the air out of any team. And yet that was the team that showed up today. When it came to the physicality department, when it came to the intensity department, when it came to the want to win department. Now, the Pittsburgh Steelers gave up 13 points defensively. I think that's a pretty good defensive showing, but it came, there's also some context there. Missing Minkah Fitzpatrick, 2 middle linebackers out, having to basically play the entire game with your rushing inside linebackers. I mean, true, if the Steelers were playing a better quarterback than DTR, I think this game is a blowout. There was a lot of drop passes, a lot of missed passes by their quarterback. And those errors are what kept the Pittsburgh Steelers in this game. But like I said, it's the defense has, I don't want to say excuses, but there's some context there as to why maybe perhaps they didn't have the best of games, but yet they held the Cleveland Browns to 10 points in the first half and only to 3 in the second, which was and what ended up being, the game-winning field goal at the end of regulation. After the defense had stopped the Cleveland Browns on several possessions in the fourth quarter and even put the Pittsburgh Steelers offense in prime position, that, hell, man, they maybe should have tried to roll Boswell out there at the end for a 62-yard field goal. I don't know, if it was too windy out there or if maybe perhaps Boz, wasn't making them from there before game. But, you're in that position. Your offense really hasn't done anything outside of a one big play by Jaylen Warren. You're finally in position to put some points on the board. The game is 10-10 at that point. Just push it out there. They don't call the middle of the field because Kenny can't throw. 4-yard screen is a target area, let alone middle of the field. Yeah, the only thing that Kenny Pickett can do is the outside pass and the back shoulder pass, which I'll be honest with you guys. I'll have my conversations with, my father or my buddies who watch the Steelers, the guys who are on other podcasts with me. And I'll tell folks, I'm like, I'm not necessarily entirely sure if that was really supposed to be a back shoulder pass on some of those plays. There's been times where the receiver is wide open going down the field and the ball is underthrown, in my opinion. And, it allows a defensive player to get in position to make a tackle. So I don't know. The back shoulder pass does seem to be something that he's good at. I just hope it's something that is intended as much as it is thrown. Because there are times that there are receivers who are streaking down the field that he can hit in front of, but he don't have the strength and the timing is off just basically because of how slow his release is. I saw these issues last year. I thought that maybe perhaps he could, take a step forward. Maybe he could perhaps read or be able to read zone. And that's not the case. In fact, I think he said in his press conference that he was expecting the Cleveland Browns to play man, but they ended up playing zone, which threw them off, which I don't think it threw them off. I think it threw him off. And like I've said it in multiple videos, I break down film constantly every week, which reminds me, you should guys hit that like and hit the subscribe button. And I watch this offense. I watch this game multiple times from multiple angles. And I've been saying it since last year. I don't think this guy got it. I don't think he has an NFL arm or NFL talent or an NFL. He doesn't have it above the shoulders. Can't read a defense. And he's not very accurate at throwing receivers open. The anticipatory throw. The throw that made Duck good. The one thing that Duck could do more than any other receiver or any other quarterback at the time that he was on the Pittsburgh Steelers, while Ben was on the an injured reserve, was that he could throw accurately those anticipatory throws. He knew when a receiver was going to be in the zone, and he could throw that ball accurately. Now he had to throw the ball really early because he himself struggled in the strength department. Had he had just a little bit more arm talent there, he had the ability to, in my opinion, to possibly have an NFL career. Now, he didn't have the arm talent, and that's what ended up being the downside of Duck. But I think I saw more flashes out of Duck than I have out of Kenny at this point. And that might be a stretch, but I'm just really disappointed in the play of the quarterback position for the last year and a half. Let's see. I'm going to read some of these comments, and then we'll continue to talk about this game. All right. Kenny Pickett in 2019 as a senior was considered a 5th-round undrafted free agent practice squad player. Sam Howell was projected as number 1 overall pick potentially. Yeah, I remember and recall that. Sam Howell, in in my opinion, is a better quarterback than Kenny Pickett. I don't think he's anything great, but this was a weak class. One season changes everything. NFL scouting is, yeah. I think that ends up coming up to be what it could be. It's the scouting department. And if we look at what Omar Khan did this year, all right, let's look at what Omar Khan did. First round, Broderick Jones. Second round, Joey Porter. And then it was Keanu Benton. And then it was Darnell Washington. And then Nick Herbig. I think I would take those 5 players in the first 3 rounds over Kenny Pickett, over Najee Harris, over Pat Freiermuth. Even George Pickens at this time. George Pickens has a great ability to catch the ball, but obviously if he doesn't have a quarterback that's going to give him the ball, he's not a team player first in that type of sense, because he's running the laziest of routes. It's not really he's not really running routes. It's more like a jog sometimes. And I get it. He's frustrated. Nobody's going to throw him the ball. That's why he liked that comment or that post on Instagram. George Pickens could be that dude if somebody could throw him the ball. I think that's true. Let's see. How do you have a guy like Warren and only give him 9 carries? Canada needs to go. I agree. I don't know if that is a Canada decision. I think that player personnel is more of a Tomlin decision than it is a Canada decision. But if it is Canada who is deciding on how many opportunities somebody has to run the ball, then yeah, he definitely does need to get to go. Because at the end of the day, the running backs as a tandem end up with 21 attempts. That's a decent amount given the amount of times that, given the fact that the running game, the passing game never got going, and it was only a few plays, and then it was a punt. And speaking of punting, my God, Presley Harvin, consistency is where this team fails in a lot of things. If they fail in consistently stopping the run and consistently stopping all the receivers. There's usually a receiver out there that takes control of the game and gets a couple hundred, maybe 100 yards in a game. This week, Njoku could have been that guy, but he dropped the ball so many times, and that ended a lot of drives for the Cleveland Browns. Presley Harvin is another guy that, he flashes, he'll bomb a kick 60+ yards and then shank it for 20 in the most important time of the game. I don't know. If it's a consistency problem, I think that's a disciplinary problem. A disciplinary problem comes from the top. That's a head coach problem. No real OC will come here and let Tomlin tell him what to do. That's 100% true. If you think about it, what OC is going to come here if Tomlin is there? Tomlin doesn't want to give up on his first round quarterback. We've all heard the fire Matt Canada, chants going everywhere. I mean, it's in Utah, it's probably in Mexico City in Canada, and it's probably traversed all the way to the United Kingdom. I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised if we hear it at a soccer game sometime soon. What offensive coordinator is going to want to come into this offense knowing the expectations from the fan base and how bad that's going to make you look? And if you have no control on who is going to be the quarterback, I don't think that's going to work. I think that if you get a new offensive coordinator in here, and if you're going to get a good one, he's going to want to take a little bit of control of some things, and he's going to want to bring in his quarterback, because that's what the Steelers did with Kenny Pickett. He's not really Tomlin's guy as much as he is Canada's guy. So I think that those two guys are also married. Now, I think that the Steelers will succumb to some pressure as they did last season when they put in Kenny Pickett. I think that was an Art Rooney the second decision back last year when Kenny Pickett came in against the Jets. So we'll see. Myles Garrett might be the best player in the NFL, no lie. Dude is playing at an MVP level this year. Yeah, he hit Kenny Pickett pretty good. He hit him good. And what about that fourth down, y'all? I'll be honest with you. I didn't think they were going to give it to the Steelers because the rule is as soon as the helmet comes off of the ball carrier, the play is dead. Remember a few years ago, actually, it was the Le'Veon Bell play against the Ravens where he was going into the end zone. And while in the air, the helmet gets knocked off. He ends up hitting the ground pretty hard, ends up, going to sleep at that point. And because his helmet left his head before he crossed the goal line, even though he didn't touch the ground or any of those things, the ball was put back out of the end zone. Right. And where Kenny Pickett's helmet came off, I'm not sure if he was already past the first down marker at that point. I'll take it, but I was that one was close. The safety was even closer. I thought that was going back for, 2 against the Steelers on that one. Not good. Not good. If Kenny played average, the the Steelers would be probably 8-2. I think they would have won this game for sure. Jacksonville's another game I think they probably won. I know he gets, taken out or whatnot, but I think a better quarterback doesn't put himself in position to get knocked to get hit so often. There's so many times where Kenny Pickett is running into pressure. He's running into the defense. And I think a better quarterback in those type of situations isn't going to do that. Also, I think a better quarterback is going to align and call the protection better. Protection is just as much on the offensive line as it is on the quarterback. And I just think there's too much on Kenny's plate. I think he can't read the defenses, move the offensive line, move all those things to determine where pressure is coming. And in my opinion, I think it's too much for him. He's rattled and he looks overwhelmed. Can he get over that? I don't know. I mean, the guy's like, 30 years old almost now? He's like the oldest, one of the oldest rookies to ever come out. I don't know. But if he played average, the Pittsburgh Steelers, I mean, not only would they perhaps have a better record right now, but I think they'd have more respect as a team. I think that there'd probably be less injuries as well. To think that the amount of time that the Pittsburgh Steelers defense is out on the field does not affect the wear and tear of the players is just flabbergast me. There's no way that those two things don't coordinate with each other. And I know, and I get it. And I think the biggest clue of what the biggest problem is because it's so obvious that Mike Tomlin he doesn't announce it. He doesn't want to acknowledge it. I mean, when has he ever said, outside of we need to see more, but also need to see more out of the coaches, has Tomlin ever been critical of his quarterback? He babies him. He's like he treats him like one of those, like a child, like he gets a participation award no matter what happens on the field. It's ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. And even today, he defended the play of the quarterback, saying, hey, the defense was good. The defense pressured him. The defense did some things. At a certain point, man, take some accountability and even have him take some accountability and say, hey, our quarterback play isn't what it needs to be. Just as if it was the offensive line. If the offensive line was allowing X amount of sacks per game, and it wasn't because the quarterback was running into it, if it was just pressure all the time up the center, you guys tell me, do you guys really think that Mike Tomlin's going to go up there and say, oh man, it's a coach's thing that Cole can't block? No, he's going to say we need better play from our offensive line. He's going to call them out because he's called out the offensive line before. He's called out the defense. He's called out many of players in the past, and why he is cradling this quarterback is beyond me. Let him grow up. Let him be a man. Let him take, the hits on the chin. And either he's going to get better or he's not. And if he's not, admit that you made a mistake. Don't let it take 4 years. Don't ruin TJ Watt, Minka Fitzpatrick, Cam Hayward's last part of his career. Basically because you feel that you have to let this marinate. You have to let the quarterback somewhat develop. When you, as an organization, or as Mike Tomlin, as a group, has not developed a quarterback. I mean, how many quarterbacks have they drafted that have gone elsewhere? I think Joshua Dobbs is probably the best that Mike Tomlin has drafted, and they have drafted quarterbacks as high as the 3rd round. And those quarterbacks have gone. There's plenty of 3rd round, 4th round, 2nd round quarterbacks who have done well. Mason Rudolph was a 3rd round quarterback that the Steelers gave a 1st round grade. All right. There's been multiple quarterbacks. Not one of them has developed in the way that even would probably remain in the league. Had the Steelers not left the door open for Mason Rudolph, he wouldn't have a team right now. The only reason he's on the Pittsburgh Steelers is because nobody else wanted him. Maybe it's the Steelers' inability to develop a quarterback, or maybe perhaps the unwillingness to change philosophy, to change into a team that's going to want to put the ball in the quarterback's hands and have a quarterback that can, just do a decent job. You don't even have to have an elite quarterback right now. I mean, if this was Kenny Dilfer, I'd be okay, but it's freaking Kenny Tebow, and it's not even lasting that long. His 4th quarter play in the last 2 games have been horrible. If we had a game manager that can put up, what do you think would be average yards for a backup or a game manager quarterback? 220 yards, 240 yards through the air, maybe, or 200 yards averaging, 1.5 touchdowns, 1.3 touchdowns a game. That's a dream right now for Kenny Pickett. That's a dream. Today he had 106 yards passing. 130 last week. I don't get it. Unbelievable. Worst game ever seen out of the Steelers. Yeah, it was a horrible game to watch. Kenny is the preseason champion. I was calling him, I probably should have put this out there, but, earlier this year, I was like, man, we got Mr. Preseason, because he shows up in the preseason. Even last year, he was showing up in the preseason. Everybody was like, shoot, forget Mitch Trubisky. Let's start Kenny Pickett. He's coming out there getting hit, throwing balls, making touchdowns, being accurate with the ball, making decisions, even with pressure on his face. I don't know where it went. Calling Kenny and CA competent is like calling Deshaun Watson Dr. Ruth. Yeah. Time to get a better quarterback. They can't draft that QB. See, I mean, that is the one thing that does concern me. I mean, even Ben Roethlisberger, he was Kevin Colbert's guy, right? But was he really Kevin Colbert's guy? Or was it the fact that Ben Roethlisberger dropped in the 2004 draft? You know what I mean? And if you go back and you look at the 1st round picks for the Pittsburgh Steelers under Kevin Colbert, TJ Watt is the only one going back as far as before TJ Watt was Artie Burns. Jarvis Jones, I think, was in 2013, 2012, somewhere around there. So you can go back a decade of bad 1st rounders unless somebody fell. TJ Watt fell. He should not have been there at 30. DeCastro fell. He should not have been there either. If a player that, has that potential falls, that's pretty much the only time that the Steelers did well in the 1st round. Two more years to see if he's it, but yet in the last 5 games, he's had 1 touchdown pass. He's had 20 something games. Even if he turns it around next week against the Cincinnati Bengals, let's just say he comes back and he hits 3 touchdowns, 250 yards. I don't see a 300-yard game unless, Cincinnati or whoever the opponent is gets up big and the Steelers are forced to put the ball down the field. I think that's probably the only time we're going to see Kenny Pickett really open it up. But, even if he were to have a game next week, is that the outlier or is that who he is? Because at this point, we've had over 20 games of who he is. At a certain point, even a broken clock is right twice a day. A certain point, we should have seen a breakout game. The fact that we haven't is the most concerning part, because who else we hadn't seen a breakout game and that everybody gave up hope on? Number 2, Mason Rudolph. And if you go look at his stats compared to Kenny Pickett's stats, with less, in 2019, Mason Rudolph had Juju Smith-Schuster, who was dealing with a bunch of injuries, James Conner, who was dealing with a bunch of injuries, Deontay Johnson was his number 1 wide receiver. He was a rookie. And yet his stats were probably a little bit better on the average aspect of it than Kenny Pickett's, especially in the touchdown range. I don't know. Is number 7. I've gone in the live chat a couple of times asking him that when he's doing the play-by-play, because I honestly think that Ben could do a lot more with this offense and this offensive line. I mean, Ben literally willed that 2021 team into the playoffs with Dan Moore as a rookie as right tackle and Kendrick Green as his rookie center. I mean, just think about that. Had he had this offensive line, what he probably could have done. Had he had a receiver like George Pickens, what could he have done? I know he's up there in age, his arm wasn't there, but the decision making was there, and the decision to throw and the willingness to throw the ball was there, and so was the release. So even if the offensive line struggled in a game, or they were going up a game like today where it was Myles Garrett, he was able to get out of those games without getting touched because of his release. In fact, I think it was more because of Ben Roethlisberger and the way he played the game that had more to do with why Myles Garrett was unsuccessful going up against Dan Moore. And when you see it today, he victimized Dan Moore. I think that that's just another indication of what a good quarterback can do for you, is he can do some certain things and adapt in certain games. And that if the game plan isn't perfect, if the opposition doesn't change their tendencies, that he can still figure it out and come out victorious. As to where we are right now, if the quarterback changes or the opposition changes their scheme, they do something different than what they put on tape, the quarterback struggles, can't figure it out, can't do in-game adjustments, hasn't seen it before, has to hold the ball, gets hit multiple times, doesn't let go of the ball, doesn't trust what he sees down the field. That is exactly what is going on right now. Good game. Yeah. I mean, it was a good game towards the end just because it was a close game. But to be honest with you, had the drops not been a situation, I'm not sure it would have been such a close or good game. The refs gave it back to you because we stuffed on the goal line and you lost the challenge. And it could have been. I see you're a Browns fan now. Makes sense. But, I'm also a realist. I can say that, today the Pittsburgh Steelers got out physical by the Cleveland Browns. That's something that we haven't had to say since, they came into the league. And, I thought that the Browns were going to give away this game. And yet it was the Pittsburgh Steelers. And like the title of the show says, that Kenny Pickett got out-Kenny'd. Kenny got out-Kenny'd. Another quarterback played so-so throughout the game, did enough to keep the team in the game. And then in the fourth quarter with the ball in their hands, goes down the field and makes a game, puts a game-winning drive together. But I'll say this. I think that, had the Steelers had Minkah Fitzpatrick out there and a coverage inside linebacker that they trust, I think the Steelers could have won this game easily. This was definitely a winnable game. What took it out of the Steelers' hands was, the offense again. And like I said, this is the part that frustrates me, is the defense was hurt. The offense got their players back. Pat Freiermuth was out there. Deontay Johnson is back. Kenny Pickett is there. Both of our running backs are healthy. Everybody on the offensive line is good to go. There is nobody on the offensive side of the ball that is out due to injury that was designated a starter come week 1. In fact, you have Broderick Jones taking place of Chukwuekorfor, not due to injury, but due to his play being better. So you have an upgrade at a position. And yet this team just can't do anything. It's frustrating. Something happened, confidence, or he's scared now. He definitely changed from last year to, from this year to last year. Yeah, I think that there's tape on him when it comes to Kenny. Ben Roethlisberger said it half a decade ago. I think he was talking about RG3. Robert Griffin III, the guy who wants to be the Browns quarterback. They should have let him be the quarterback. But, he did well. He won like Rookie of the Year or something like that his rookie season. And I think it was him. Ben was like, well, all right, let's see how good he is in 3 years. Because the NFL has NFL defenses are coached by NFL coaches who study film religiously. They're going to know your tendencies, your weaknesses, your strengths. And the more film you put out there, the more of those things are apparent. So I've said it since earlier this season. When it comes to a sophomore year, whether it's a jump or a slump, it's going to be determined by the tape. Can the player beat the tape? Can the player, now that the defenses of the NFL understand your tendencies, weaknesses, and strengths, and now can play to those things, can you overcome those things? It's kind of like Jaylen Warren and Najee Harris. They're playing the same defense. I know there was this big old talk and spew, earlier in the year, like, oh, when Jaylen Warren is in the game, defenses are playing differently. They're prepared for the pass. But when Najee goes into the game, they're bunching it up. That's not the case anymore. It's not the case. Jaylen Warren has put enough tape and enough film down to show that he is to be respected in the running game. And yet he still does it. How many times is he making people miss? It's not a situation where he's not getting touched in the backfield or, he's getting hit or he's not getting hit. He is. He's having to make people miss. He's having to make extra yards, having to do special things that Najee Harris just doesn't do. Just don't do it. Now, I like the 1-2 punch between the two. I think that's the way to go. But I think it should be more of a Jaylen Warren punch a little bit more often. Make it more of a I would prefer to see, Jaylen Warren out there probably about 70% of the plays. Give him a breather, give him a break with Najee Harris. If you're in a situation where you're 3rd, 4th, and 1, maybe even goal line, that might be the opportunity to give Najee Harris the ball. But I think that there needs to be a movement here to get Jaylen Warren the ball more. He's by far your better option. He outperforms Najee Harris in every aspect of the running, of being a running back. He sees the line. He sees his vision is better. His running ability is better. He hits the hole faster. He's quicker. He pass blocks better. He catches the ball better. And then he can get yards after the catch better. So every aspect across every plane that you want to check mark, I guess outside of the height and weight category, Jaylen Warren check marks all of them over Najee Harris. I mean, I think Jaylen Warren has a better hurdle too. He doesn't get as high. He He gets to the ground faster so that he can start running better or running quicker. So I think that there needs to be a move there. The wide receiver room, Deontay Johnson, he's an elite route runner, and it's kind of unfortunate that he's not had an opportunity or an elite passing game. You know, with Ben Roethlisberger, was it his arm? Was it the offensive line? It could have been a combination of the two, but he wasn't the Ben Roethlisberger of his prime. You know, Mitch Trubisky and the combination of him and Kenny Pickett. You know, it just sucks because we can't really tell what he is. But when he's been given opportunities, and they've been some of those weightier moments, he has, dropped the ball on occasion. But you look at that. You look at the frustrations with George Pickens. You look at how he's just kind of wants a spotlight on himself type of stuff. I don't think the Steelers have a true number one wide receiver that they can count on. That they can count on that's going to be there every single play. That's not going to take a play off because, the ball's not coming to him a few times a game. He's not going to take a play off because they're frustrated or when your offense scores a touchdown and it just didn't happen to be you, that you're going to go pout on the sideline, go erase all your, Steelers contacts off your social media in some sort of tantrum, like a 2-year-old. That is not the behavior of a number one wide receiver that you want on your team. That is not the behavior of a player that you can count on, that when things get tough or things get heated and the stakes are high, that player is not going to go out there and somebody's going to get in their head and he's going to create a personal foul penalty that's going to put the Pittsburgh Steelers in a bad position. And speaking of personal foul penalty, that personal foul on Alex Highsmith on the roughing the passer penalty, I get it. It's helmet to helmet, but the guy is, I don't know how tall he is, but I mean, he didn't forcibly hit him. They kind of connected. They touched, yes, but it wasn't a hit. It wasn't like he left his feet. He kind of just, he saw that he had the ball out and he put his arms up, and their bodies just so happened to collide. And because of the guy's height, their face masks, touched. Is it by the letter of the law? I guess so. The flag is there, but these quarterback penalties, I think they need to be lined up a little bit. Let's see. Put me at quarterback. I don't have any experience at quarterback or anything. That I did play up until high school, so I don't have any real experience when it comes to reading or coverages or stuff like that. But I know a little bit, and I've looked into a lot, and I think that when it comes to pre-snap stuff, if I can read kind of what's going on with a fair amount of accuracy, and I'm not looking at film the way, the Steelers are or should be, I find it concerning, because I'll say this, 8 out of 10 times, defenses aren't hiding anything. If they're in cover one, they're showing them cover one. And the reason being is, why are you going to hide anything if somebody can't beat something when it's in their face? If you hide it, all you're doing is putting that on film for other teams that you need to hide what you're doing to see. So most defenses don't hide anything against the Steelers. It's what I've been able to see. And because of that, I feel like it's, any quarterback should be able to get back there and read what's going on, especially if they made it to this level. Sadly, the only way they bench Pickett is if he gets hurt. That's true. But even if he does, I mean, I'm not a fan of Mitch Trubisky. I'm not a fan of what Mason Rudolph can do. I don't think they have an answer at the quarterback position at this point. And that concerns me, because that is the position that if you want to do something, if you want to make the playoffs and actually win a game, or maybe even have an opportunity to lift up in Lombardi, it's not 2002 anymore where you can have a Trent Dilfer. Offenses and are creative. Offenses are pushing the ball down the field. They are getting more points per game. I think this year maybe not so much the case. I think there's been a drop back in production this year as far as offenses go. But for the most part, once these offenses kind of figure out what defenses are doing to them, because I think they are doing some little things different here and there. I think that offenses are going to be putting up points, and this mentality of Steelers football just isn't it. It's not going to be it. And unfortunately, I think that the only way they're going to get away from this mentality is if they change it from the top. Juju, sorry if I mispronounced that. 199. Look what I said in chat. All right. You fools. Another quarterback will be the same. It's coaching. Look at Dotson, Dobbs thriving in other teams. These guys sucked and couldn't get in the field with us. FU Canada. All right. Here's the thing, though. I don't think Joshua Dobbs was under Matt Canada. And if you look at Ben Roethlisberger, so who were the quarterbacks under Matt Canada? The quarterbacks that were, it's 40-year-old Ben on a bum elbow. It is Mitch Trubisky, who is the definition of a bust. Second overall pick, never became anything. Every quarterback that was drafted behind him outplayed him and outperformed him. Sounds a little familiar. But he was the definition of a bust. And then you got Kenny Pickett, who I guess you can say the jury is still out on him. He's only played 20-plus games. And although those games are pretty consistent as far as yards, averages, touchdowns, interceptions, I guess the jury could still be out on him. But from what we know of him, he's not the greatest quarterback in the world. So I'm just saying, like, what offensive coordinator out there is going to be able to work the magic with what he's had? And if that person exists, that person's is a head coach, for one. And two, I'm not saying that coaching doesn't matter, but if it was all on coaching, the Patriots wouldn't be in the position that they are. Josh McDaniels wouldn't be unemployed. The Belichick tree would be flourishing much more than the Shanahan tree. You get what I'm saying? I think players have a lot to do with it. I think that the reason why the Pittsburgh Steelers went all those years without a losing record had little to do with Mike Tomlin and a lot to do with Ben Roethlisberger. Just my 2 cents, though. Kevin Dotson is the number one PFF rated line. He only played like a game and a half, though. I don't know if he's back or not yet. I know he had a leg injury. But while he was there, yeah, he was rated number one. But PFF also rated Broderick Jones our worst lineman in the last couple of games. I don't know about this game. It's not out yet. But I can, for one, tell you that this offensive line has played leagues above what they were at before Broderick Jones came in. The ability that Broderick Jones has to get to the second level, to pull and actually make contact with the person that he's supposed to be blocking while pulling, is next level. And that's where the issue is for like Chukwuefor. And, he wouldn't, when he would pull, it was like maybe 25% of the time is when he would hit the inside linebacker that he was supposed to. And when he would go up to the second level, the only time he could make contact with the inside linebacker or block that person is if he went straight there, never chipping the defensive tackle in front of him. Because if he did, he was too late to get there. Broderick Jones, on the other hand, can do that. He'll chip the inside defensive tackle and make his way up to the middle linebacker. And because his ability to do so, it has made the players around him better, even though PFF says that he's somehow worse. And I think he has like less pressures, less sacks. I don't know. I don't really buy into PFF too much. Ask Haley to come back. Art should give a big pay incentive for the scout who can find the guy. but I won't get off the wallet. That's what it seems like. It seems like things are a little tight, when it comes to the financial things. I think that was one of Mike Tomlin's sayings about, Ben Roethlisberger, Kenny Pickett, is when things get a little tight, they're the same. The Steelers are quite a bit tight when it comes to the wallet. Why we let Josh Dobbs go? Dude is balling now. In the opportunities that he had, it didn't seem like he was the next guy. I'll say that. His accuracy wasn't there. His legs were always there, and his ability to move. And the guy is a genius. So he was going to eventually kind of get it all together, I think. Why they let him go is because they had Ben Roethlisberger. Now, I don't know if Joshua Dobbs is a top 10 QB in the league or has that ceiling of top 10 QB in the league. But I'll tell you this, I think he's definitely top 15, top 16. And if the Pittsburgh Steelers had a top 15, top 16 quarterback, they would definitely be in the talks for being contenders in the AFC. And yeah, that's true. I think Dobbs, for Arizona, he won against the Cowboys, and then after that, they didn't win again. Dobbs had 4.7 yards per pass with the Steelers. That's why. Yeah. Like I said, the Steelers here, it's going to be a long season, guys. I think that the only way that the Pittsburgh Steelers are going to win games is if they keep doing what they're doing and keeping games close enough in hopes that they can do something in the fourth quarter to win the game. And that's been kind of the identity of the Steelers. I think that they can build upon what they have. If they build upon the players that have shown that they can handle more, like a Jalen Warren, like even a Darnell Washington, he got another pass thrown to him. And the guy looks physical. The guy's big. He's strong. He's going to get you those 1, 2, 3 extra yards that, maybe perhaps a Pat Freiermuth is going to go down on. You know what I mean? So, and his blocking ability is better. I know that he whiffed on a block pretty good today that ended up with, loss of yards. But for the most part, his blocking is there. I think he has a brighter future, in my opinion, or a bright future. Let me not put brighter. I think that if Pat Freiermuth can get the blocking thing down, and I think if the Steelers would actually throw him the ball, I think he can show that he's a pretty good tight end in this game. The blocking aspect is what's concerning me. And when you have a team like the Pittsburgh Steelers, who their identity at this point is running the ball, that's where it becomes a concern. But if the Steelers will throw him the ball, maybe spread it out a little bit more and show something different, we'll see. We'll see. Kenny's new nickname is Check Down Kenny. Yeah, I was going to call him, Kenny. What was it? I called him Kenny Comeback, Kenny Tebow. I don't know. I just want to call him second string at this point. But it is what it is. He's going to be the quarterback for the remainder of the year. And even if they changed it, I don't think it would make much of a difference. But the Steelers just got to go back in there, work on it. They got the Cincinnati Bengals next on their second game, tour of Ohio, so to speak. They're dealing without their quarterback. And I just hope Kenny Pickett don't get outperformed by their no-name QB as well. But that's going to do it for me today, guys. I want to say thank you to all of you guys that have checked in and watched the show. Please hit that like and subscribe button. On Tuesday, as always, I'll have another film breakdown and session on the passing game, what went right, what went wrong, what were the opportunities that were missed, what were the ones that were gained. Until then, we'll see you next time. Peace out, y'all.